Hi, Nadir, and welcome to the AboutHer show. This is a show where we showcase the remarkable journeys of trailblazing women, women who have triumphed over obstacles and shattered barriers to pursue their dreams. Yet we understand that true inclusivity requires the involvement of all genders. And therefore, we extend a heartfelt invitation to men who share our commitment to supporting women in their quest to break down barriers and achieve their dreams. Your presence on the platform is invaluable, and together, let's strive for progress and inclusivity, making a difference, one story at a time. Thank you so much for being here. So this is a question which I would want both of you to answer, a little bit about your early life, childhood, and if you think any of those experiences are the reason why you are who you are today, what you are today.
Hi, Sangeeta.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting us. It's an absolute pleasure. We believe, both Peter and I, that being on multiple platforms talking about parenting, talking about gender roles is so important today, not just for our generation, but for the coming generations and the generations that are before us, because I think these sort of conversations are very important. So thank you to start that off. So it's been an interesting journey for me. I've always been surrounded by women at home as well as at work. So for me, the influence of a woman, the power of a woman has left an indelible mark, both personally as well as professionally. My mother did whatever that she could to raise me, to ensure that I reach somewhere. And the reason why I say this, and this is not just a son doting over his mother, but the reason why I say this is because when my sister came along, there's a 6-year age gap between us. She was treated more as a boy and got all the freedom that she did, and whereas I was very protected for whatever reason, and that was a beauty, right? So I'll give you a very simple example. The first time I took a traveled alone in public transport, right? I think I was about 12 or 13 years old. Imagine, it was that late for me. And my grandmother would take, that shagun ka paisa, some token money, and then she would just do some little aarti sort of thing. And then it's like, okay, here, touch this money, keep it, so that you're safe and everything. And it was a big moment, right? My sister traveled by bus when she was 9 years old and nobody cared. And she's like, she'll figure her way out, And I was like, wait, why was I like, what have I done wrong to deserve that, right?
That's the second child syndrome, I think. The first one is always more protected.
I mean, for me, I think it's beautiful that they just let my sister be, and it was just such a proud moment. They my family sent her on a 1-year exchange trip to Denmark when she was 16 years old. Wow. I made my first international trip when I was 21, 22, right? So I love that, right? I think that's the kind of background that we come for, and we realize the power of both men and women in terms of raising their children, and I think we've taken that, and when we became parents, we learned from those experiences, and we've passed on that, or we're trying very hard to pass on that to our kids. So yeah, that's what my little home structure has been, and I love the fact that I got the kind of freedom, and my sister also enjoyed that kind of freedom to do whatever that we wanted, irrespective of our genders. So yeah.
Incredible. Yes. So yeah, Peter?
So I actually have a very different upbringing, because my parents lived in the Middle East while I grew up in India. So I've split my time in my childhood between both places. I was actually brought up by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And I think one of the things that really impacted me as a parent, I mean, as first of all, as a young adult to then a parent, was the influence of my grandmother. My mom is a twin, so I spent a lot of time with my aunt also. And then later on with my mother. And I think one of the beauties of that, I realize as an adult growing, looking back and later on as a parent, is at no point did I feel that men and women were different, because these women were really influential in my life till date, right?
Yeah.
And also there was no gender stereotypes. My grandmother, growing up in the 1930s 40s, she was working since the age of 16.
Wow.
uh, my mother worked despite having three children, so she was always working. I saw that, and I
Mhm.
think that was a very strong influence on when I was looking for a partner also, right?
Yeah.
So I remember having a conversation with my wife, and I was like, "Oh, obviously you're going to work, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I this is what I've seen, so I don't expect any different."
Yeah.
Uh, Also, the same thing. I mean, Nader was talking about his childhood. Since I mentioned my mom was working, my
Mhm.
mom actually, in when we lived in the Gulf, she had her shift for work starting earlier than my dad.
Okay.
And we were fortunate enough, my dad lived in the same building as his office. And
Oh,
I say
wow.
fortunate
Okay.
because what would happen is my mom would take the bus to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
And my earliest memories are of my dad feeding me breakfast on the kitchen counter. So I have seen like my dad do stuff which typically you saw mothers do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which or an entire generation later, I'm also doing with my son, kind of getting him ready and stuff like that, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of parallels through that. But couple of things I think that played a huge influence in my life, which I only realize now when I so to say join the dots, right? Is I grew up around a lot of music, so that helped me, appreciate music. There was always the radio or music playing in the house. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that led me to, as an adult, working in music events, blogging, and strangely enough, even podcasting started through music. So there's been that consistency there. But
Mm-hmm.
my mom, towards before she passed away for a few years, was a primary school teacher, and my mother-in-law was actually her entire career. She was a teacher, arts and craft. She
Okay.
taught here in Bombay.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that, like while this was always happening as a child, I saw my mom and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's only later that now when I'm teaching, I realize, wait, there's a reason why I enjoy teaching part time, in addition to all the work that I do, is because I saw this and I saw the kind of joy and
Yeah.
impact that they had, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of parallels I draw from their life, which is kind of just c- impacted me, but also continues to in everything that I do.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, your childhood, I think the way we raise our children has a great impact, because we don't realize at that time, even when we are growing up as children, but it's later, and especially when you become a parent yourself, then you realize the role that your parents played. So yeah, and I can totally resonate with the teacher bit because I myself teach, so I can totally understand that. All right. Okay, so guys, if you were to look back on your life, and as you said that, surrounded by women all the time, were there any particular life lessons that you picked up from any one of them? I mean, it could have been your mom, your sister, teacher, aunt, anyone.
I think loads. Um, the older you get, the more you look into the past and see what could have been better, right? And then you try and draw parallels.
Yeah.
So my mom, okay, I think growing up, raising two kids, living in a joint family, not the most ideal situation. It's tough. Right?
Yeah.
It's tough. Obviously, 80s, the 80s in India, or I guess any part of the world for that matter,
Mm-hmm.
who practices joint family um, setups.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's tough, right? But over the years, one major lesson I think that I take away, and that's from my mom,
Mm-hmm.
is she's so fantastic at um, keeping relations.
Okay.
It could be anyone. It
Hmm.
could be anyone.
Hmm.
And when I hear about my mother from other people,
Hmm.
and they always like, oh, Maria aunties, she's always there and she's always helpful. She's always talking to us. She's always doing that. And I'm the opposite. I don't keep relations. I don't do any of that. Right? I think I can just go out and say that, listen, I don't have too many friends. And I think the older you get, the lesser your friends, right? So that's one thing that now retrospectively I have started doing more, is trying to keep in touch with people professionally, personally, going back. Hey, how's it going? I'm the one initiating that, and I learned all of that from my mom because I keep seeing her talking to people on the phone,
Yeah.
or if anyone, and she loves inviting people, and I'm like, oh come on, ma, you can't invite people again. So
Yeah.
and I was like, go to your room. I don't care. Like I'm gonna invite people. That's who I am. That's my life. And the second thing is how social she is. She loves going out. She's constantly going out. She's constantly going out.
Hmm.
And that's beautiful, right? Because you cannot possibly expand your horizon staying within four walls. And that's
Oh,
also something that I picked up from my mom. And when I got married, I think my wife sort of added that extra layer that okay, we need to start going out, we need to do more, we need to travel more.
hmm.
And then, once you've tasted blood, you can't stop it.
Yeah.
So these are a couple of things that I take from, the important women in my life. And obviously the other most important woman in my life is my daughter. So
Yeah.
after my wife and my mother,
Hmm.
because an 8-year-old, almost 8-year-old, the kind of things you can learn from them. And
Yeah.
this is something that I tell everyone, that the reason why I would consider myself a good leader is because of parenting, right? Because parenting is about raising little humans. They're not kids. It's managing. You can't say I'll fire you. You can't. You just have to
You
deal
can't.
with it,
Yeah.
right? You can't fire your kid. You're like, okay, go to some other family. You can't do that. And
Yes.
that is I think leadership 101. Like,
Absolutely.
how do you deal with tantrums, with emotions, with outbursts, with extreme happiness when you are going through some tough things? And it's just beautiful, right? That whole arrangement, because once you become a parent, things just change.
Absolutely.
So from the oldest to the youngest, they all teach you some stuff. And I always try and borrow something or the other and try and improve myself as a person by these little traits that I notice in the women in my life.
Okay. Yeah, because I guess, everybody has something to teach you. It's just that we have to be open enough to be accepting and believing that they can teach us something. Okay, so have you ever had an instance where a woman's perspective completely changed your outlook on something? Like men and women, we all have our ways of, believing in things and believing that certain things happen in a certain way. But, sometimes someone just comes along the way and bingo, your perspective, your outlook completely changes. So have you ever had that kind of a moment or an incident that you remember?
Wow, there are so many. I mean, like, I think with my wife, it's been a lot more because I think when I was much younger,
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at things from my perspective, right? And I think with my wife, I realized, like, I'll give you a simple example, right?
Mm.
I talked about my grandmom working and I talked about my mom working and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I just felt that, hey, this is something that they did, they enjoyed, and that's it.
Mm.
But the moment I saw my wife going back to work post having my son, right?
Mm-hmm.
I realized, wow, this is what my mom was doing. Like, this is what my grandmom was doing all those decades before.
Mm.
This is not easy. And I think one of the things a lot of people don't realize is they think, oh, a woman goes to work because she enjoys it. I don't think that happens, right? A lot of times it's also, hey, being away from your child. It's not easy, right? Uh, Having to kind of multitask and deal with all of those various things, I think is so paramount. And I think as a man, I took a lot of that for granted, right? Like, I expected, there would be certain things, there would be certain way things were done because I was like, hey, this is, and I think when I think about like specifically to my mother and my grandmom's examples, especially when it comes to relation to
Mm.
me, I realized I had it so much easier because I didn't have to kind of think, but I realized that, for them, a
Mm.
lot of my siblings, me, we were paramount and they managed all of that without ever us feeling that, we were not important
Yeah.
for them. And I think that's something I'm constantly grateful to my wife, right? Like just how she kind of manages all of it. And also, I've realized how important a partner's role is in that, right?
Yes.
Uh, I
Paramount.
mentioned my dad earlier, right? Think about, and it's so like now retrospectively, it's very easy to do, but my dad had no reference
Yeah.
for a dad who was involved, right? So someone doing this in the 90s was not easy. And the fact that he recognized that, hey, my mom needed that support, my mom needed that help. I've also seen a lot of male members in my family gather around because they realize that, hey, this is not something which is, how do I put it? That this is something that should be done by us. It's
Mm.
not something that we should do, but because you want to do, right? And I think there's a subtle line between, responsibility and just voluntarily wanting to do kind of things. And I think be, being around that and realizing that, hey, making the significant other in your life realize that it's important that I'm there. I want to be doing this, not because you told me to do this, right? um, and I think that's one of the things I realized with my wife, because she says, I can do these things, but I want you to want to do it and
Yeah.
enjoy this with me, right? um, in India, unfortunately, childcare is primarily the prerogative of a woman, right? Now, through our conversations on Pops and a Pod, Nadir and me are seeing more and more dads involved.
Mm.
One common line we see, or one common thread we see between all those dads, is they want to be involved. It's not something that's told to them that, hey, you do this, right? So, yeah, that I feel completely putting myself and just kind of seeing day in, day out how it is for my wife, right? Yeah, it's been really changing. And I'm talking just in the last like 6, 7 years itself.
See, actually, this is the thing, like, so as a woman, I can tell you that most of the times we don't want to tell you. We just want you to know that we need you. That's the thing. And even if I think sometimes you don't end up doing anything, just by showing that you are there, you've done it all. You actually don't need to do it. You just have to show that you are there, and that makes a lot of difference. Okay.
But Sangeeta, I have a different perspective on that.
Yeah.
When we decided, my wife and I decided that we wanted to have children, plural, back then. We only have one daughter, by design, and we want to stick to that. We were very clear in our perspective that both of us are going to raise that kid. It's not that I just because I'm the man in the relationship, I just have to show up and half my job is done. No, that was never the intention. The intent was very clear that my our daughter will have best of both the worlds, from the mother and the father. And it's a very conscious decision, and it's something that comes from the inside. It doesn't have to be told. Yes, I still make mistakes. I'm not the best. I was raised at some point as a boy as well, and there were certain inherent expectations that were only to be done by boys, right? Especially when you're being raised by grandparents. So yes, those things, unfortunately for me over the years, I think it did carry on. And my wife still raps me and says like, "Hey, listen, you didn't do this," and I was like, "Sorry, it just doesn't hit me." But very conscious decision that we want to be involved. Like even Peter and I, when we speak on our podcast, and when we talk to a lot of other parents, it's very clear that they come from a certain background, that they want to do certain things, right? Peter wants to raise his son in a certain way because he feels that, okay, that's the direction he should go, and I want to raise my daughter in a certain way because I feel that's the direction that she can go in. So yes, majority of the fathers have to probably be told, but there's a whole new crop of fathers
Absolutely.
who are jumping into it head first.
Yeah. But still, I still feel we have a long way to go, because the number of those fathers who want to really be actively involved, that has to go up. Then of course, I mean, everything will be fine. But as of now, I think we still have a long way to go. So we're living in a world where we are surrounded by stereotypes. So whether it's men or women, I think we all are the victims of stereotypes. But I feel as a woman that women have to deal with, stereotypes more than men. So if I could take your pick on this, that what is the most absurd misconception you've encountered about women, and how did you debunk it?
This is actually a good one. So again, going back to what I said, right? Growing up around women, you always hear that, women are weaker than men. And I think throughout my life, that has been debunked, just seeing everyone. But the one who's debunked it the most is my wife, because, a lot of times when when I'm talking about weaker, it's not just physically, right? It's also mentally. That there's a constant thing that, oh yeah, women can't do this or women can't do that, and it's kind of funny with between my wife and me, because my tolerance for pain is really, really low.
Okay.
And whenever I tell her something, I was like, oh, this is going to hurt or this is going to pain, she just turns around and looks at me and says, I gave birth to your son.
Yeah.
Everything else is going to be like a walk in the park after that.
Yeah.
And because I was there with her all the way till the delivery, I know for a fact that if places were swapped, no way I would have been able to go through that, just
Yeah.
knowing my tolerance for pain, right? So, yeah, I think that is one of the stereotypes that get debunked very easily. Like, there's no way. And I think if you look at just all across, I think men just have to accept it, that that's not a stereotype that can
Yes.
be held at all.
Yeah. Till the time they are
You know,
to give birth, I think they have to. Yeah. You were saying something, Nadir?
no, I'm saying, see, also the virtue of being marketers, both of us, we always look at stories from different markets, right? So again, they're very urban, um, south of Bombay. We've had certain privileges in our lives, so we have a certain lifestyle. So we understand things very differently. The
Hmm.
further you go down in the
Yeah.
tier system, right?
Hmm.
You go to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and the narrative is very different. But what Peter just said, about the power of women, the strength of women is the same, right? It's about recognition,
It is about
right? So
recognition.
yeah. So the storytelling for the future is that men have to recognize this, and I agree with Peter that in his case, his wife is his go-to person, and it's the same case with me. Every time I experience any kind of a crash, mostly mentally, last year wasn't particularly good for me, the beginning of last year, and it was my wife who would lift me up and saying, is that what you're going to do? You're just going to sit and mope and just hope that somebody's going to come and get you out of that mess? Like,
Hmm.
no, just shut up and just get up and do your stuff. Like,
Good.
it's not
Yeah.
going to help you.
Yeah.
And that is what I think we all need, man or woman, it doesn't really matter, right? You just need that one person to lift you up, to pick you up. And yeah, for me, that's my wife. I always turn to her. I always, look at her for any kind of support and whatever it is, a shoulder to cry on. And yeah, men are extremely emotional. I'm telling you that men are very emotional. The point is to come out and say it and experience this and share these stories, because it is so vital for the entire group to understand that it's perfectly okay to lean on a woman. Please do that. You know how
Absolutely.
powerful they are. You know
Absolutely.
what they can
She's
do.
your
So
partner at
yeah,
the end of the day. That's what it is.
yeah.
We have to accept and recognize that she's your partner, and that's what partnership is all about. Okay,
And
so
it's not just about the wife, right, Sangeeta?
no, no,
It's
no.
all the women that you've had in your life. Like, there are times that I turn to my sister, there are times that I turn to my mom, there are times I turn to my daughter, and I said, you know what, I had a bad day in office. And like, it's okay, don't worry about it. How does it matter? You're here with me, and you're here, tell me a story. And that itself is just so uplifting.
Yes, when you can share and I guess vent it out, that I think it's half the job done. You just got it out of your system in that sense. Okay, so guys, I have two questions and addressed to, I mean, one each. So the first one, Peter. So you all, of course, you both of you believe in supporting the women in your life in whatever way you can. But how do you do that without, falling into that white knight kind of a stereotype, that's, knight in shining armor? How do you do it without sounding or behaving like that?
I think with any problem, it's first recognizing it's a problem, right?
Okay.
And I think with I've fallen in the trap for this for so many times.
Hmm.
I always tell my wife that you're very lucky because you had, and you should always thank my grandmom. I mean, of course, she met my grandmom before she died. Uh, you should thank my grandmom. You should thank all my cousins, my aunts, because they always kept me in check. They
Hmm.
always made me realize that, hey, listen, there is no there's just no gender stereotyping. You're equal to us.
Hmm.
If we need help, we will tell you. And as a young boy, you want to, like, especially with my cousins, like, I wanted to be the man. I wanted to be the elder brother. And we know the elder brother stereotype in India, right? And they were like, and even though, like, they're my cousins, but we've grown up as siblings together. And we've had like a long, multiple conversations that we're like, listen, we need you to be there. We will tell you when to be there for us. We don't need to be saved, or we don't need approvals or things like that. And I think because that got out of my head at a very young age, when it came to my wife, and I always tell her, it's like, if you want to do something, go ahead. I'm not the person who's approving of it, right? And I think also it's not just an individual, right? It's the society around.
Yes.
Uh, Also knowing when you should pipe in. So I'll give a very simple example in this case, right? Uh, when we had to hire a nanny for my son, and my wife was going back to work. Now that's a big decision, right?
Yes, yeah.
But in my head, I was like, hey, my mother-in-law is going to be there. My wife is going to be. Do I need to approve of this decision? Do I need to be vetting? No, right? When there were situations that occurred, yes, until my wife told me, hey, I need you to intervene. But until then, I realized I'm not going to be adding much more value to this, right? And me being there, a lot of times you'll see help turn around to the man in the house asking for approvals to do things. And I'm very clear that, listen, I'm not taking calls on this. And knowing that and recognizing that, I think, because it also sends out a signal that, listen, she's as important as me. There's no like someone giving a thing, right? So I think, yeah, for me, it got that entire thing got thrashed out like very early. So yeah, now literally I tell my wife, like, I'm actually happy. I'm like, listen, I don't want to be taking the decisions on certain things. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, right? And it also, I feel, creates that sense because my son also, as an example, now sees and realizes that, hey, both my mom and dad are taking decisions, right? When it comes to school also, both of us show up, or at least one show up at some time, right? So he knows. And I think that is also important because I think one thing I realized from my childhood is you learn from examples. And the fact that my son sees this now, we don't have to have that same kind of conversation or go through the entire same thing with him, right?
So yeah, as parents, we have to know that, children also imbibe. They don't always have to be taught something. They are observing, they're looking at what you're doing. So you are teaching them by example. Yes, a very, very, I think, critical point, and we have to keep that in mind as parents all the time. So Nadir, the next one is for you. So if a man is not that, knight, the white knight, then he could also be a little patronizing when a woman asks for support. How do you balance that? I mean, if my husband were to sound patronizing, I would probably just, tell him to shut up and, you don't have to be like that. So how do you handle that?
If you would have asked me this question 10 years ago, I would have given you a very different answer.
Okay.
But as I said, we all learn, right? I haven't been the perfect man, the perfect husband, the perfect brother, and the fact that I can recognize that in itself is a lesson for me. Because the story goes that men always have to be told, and it's a fact. I agree. Men have to be told certain things. I blame generational trauma or whatever leading up for how men were set up for the world, because I think there are two issues, when little boys are, and I'm talking way back when I was growing up, there's always this ridiculous amount of expectations that is suddenly put on the boy's shoulders. Tu hi hai, tu hi sab karega, everything, it's you have to work, you have to do this, you have to do well, you have to do blah. And when you grow up like that, you also then, and when I say you, I'm saying in a very subjective manner, as in more common base, like you in general. They there are certain boys who accept is like, yes, I will only do it. So now suddenly when they have to go to the workforce as an entrepreneur, as a professional, and because they've grown up understanding that, yes, I only have to, I'm the best, right? And there's nobody else who can do it. And then suddenly a woman comes across and says that that's not how it's done. You need to do it otherwise. Like, please, woman, shut up. I know exactly what I'm doing. And that becomes highly problematic. And I was that kind of a guy unknowingly that I'm actually doing this in a very unwitting manner. And then over the years, I realized that, oh, this is interesting. That okay, I didn't know. And can you imagine that I have worked for the first 14 years of my working life, I've only had women bosses. So I could have been far worse,
Yeah.
right? If I didn't have the guidance coming from the women saying, okay, this is not how you do it, and why are you getting so aggressive, or whatever it is. But today I am extremely measured in my actions and my words. Of course, it does slip in sometimes, and I don't tend to realize it, and then people have to point it out, saying, okay, but it's very rare, right, as opposed to earlier. So the patronizing tone, like a very classic case of mansplaining, and it still happens. I was in a couple of meetings last week, and when there's a man and there's a woman in a meeting, and if the man has this urge to say what she means to say is, I said, I heard perfectly well what she said. She doesn't. I don't need you to repeat it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the men do that, and I think very consciously and now subconsciously, I've just managed to just remove that from my overall process. So I'm extremely conscious of who my audience is, what is the kind of room that I'm sitting in, and who I'm talking to. Because for me, it's very important that I make an impression on people, right? Whether it's business, or whether it's personal relations, or whatever it is. Because as I said, that now I'm picking up those traits from my mother, and I've realized what the importance of it. So for me, being patronizing to begin with has kind of faded away. But it slips in because you have a wife who points it out to you, saying, don't do that, that's wrong, that's extremely wrong what you're doing. And sometimes you just don't realize, right?
You don't.
Sometimes you crack a funny joke, and it's offensive, and in your head you're like, ha ha, I'm so smart, I cracked a funny one. And your wife says, that's not funny, that's just downright offensive. And it's like, no, but it's funny. And I think that is where my problem lies, that I can't tell the difference between what is light and what is sometimes misconstrued as offensive. So I'm still learning. Hopefully in the next 1 year, I should be like completely eliminating it from my system.
We all are, because we've all been conditioned to be in certain ways. So that conditioning to kind of eliminate it or to get over it takes time. But the very fact that we are trying, I think that makes a huge difference.
Recognition, Sangeeta, it all boils down to recognition. Like, as you have to accept the fact that you've gone wrong. If you live with this in this realm that I'm always right, that I think that's where the problem lies. And it's happened to me. I've seen it. That's why I'm saying it. It's I'm not saying in a holier thou kind of situation. No, I've made stupid mistakes, and I'm glad that I had people around me, mostly women, pointing out, saying, hey, that's wrong, don't do it. And then you learn from those things.
Yeah, you do. So guys, a question totally unrelated to gender and women and all of that. A lot of us around, if you look around you, and I am doing it currently, is what I call midlife rebooting, where in your early 40s, late 40s, or whatever, you take to careers, professions, vocations, which are diametrically opposite to what you'd been doing all that while. So what are your views on that? I mean, anyone of you could answer that.
I think I strongly support it. And it comes with some context, right? Yeah. What I'm doing right now, I have zero training in. I didn't go to college for it. I didn't get any kind of technical training. But I work in audio and video production. And that's something I think was there from a very young age. I was interested. So that goes back to music, where I would actually be listening, trying figuring out all of this there. So like the joke was, in college, my mom and dad would say that we should have sent you for, instead of a business degree, to an audio engineering or another degree. And I think when I look back, it's no different. And sorry, let me take that again. When I look around me, I don't think it's any different with anyone else, right? A lot of us, Nadir and I, used to actually work together. A lot of our colleagues at the digital agency that we worked were engineers.
Okay.
And both of us would look and we'd say, like, that guy spent 4 years doing an engineering degree and now he's sitting here and writing copy or he's doing strategy.
Hmm.
But that was something that he really enjoyed, but never had a chance to explore.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think that's one of the things, I'm very grateful that we live in the times that we do,
Hmm.
because, looking back at India, right? Your profession was basically what your father's profession was, and we just kind of followed that blindly.
Hmm.
Um, I'm very glad and grateful to both my dad and my mom that they actually encouraged me
Hmm.
to do whatever I wanted. There was never a conversation with my dad where he was like, "Oh, you're doing an engineering degree or you're doing a CA and things like that." And
Hmm.
I say this in a light-hearted way because my sister actually works in accounting. So I tell my dad, at least one of your kids uh, did one of the stereotypical jobs, and my brother's an engineer. So
Okay.
imagine I'm the eldest who works in content now, brother engineer, and my sister works in accounting. So I was like, 2 out of 3 you got
Yeah.
there, right? But I feel that like we're seeing more and more of that happen, right? And I think especially as people who are working in much more senior roles now, we're seeing people switching careers, and it's strongly encouraged.
Yeah.
Especially when you see some of our guests that we've had on the podcast, Nadir and me. I mean, we've had entrepreneur women who've come from law backgrounds, finance backgrounds, right?
Yeah.
And this, if you think about it, even 15, 20 years ago was totally unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now it's strongly encouraged. And you're seeing, especially homemakers, post having their kids starting out their businesses or doing small businesses. And the value of that, I think, is tremendous, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it's very underrated, I would say.
Yes, Nadir. So, what about you? What is your perspective?
So I'm a practitioner of this, so I very well understand
Hmm.
the importance of shifting sectors completely.
Yeah.
Um, and it sort of reflects life as well, right? You're
Yeah.
not always going to be a child, you're not always going to be a teen, you're not always going to be an adult, right? And
Okay.
and I think professionally also that's how it works. So I went from broadcast content creation to advertising to now working for a not-for-profit
Hmm.
um, outfit. So I've already made three sectoral shifts, and with every shift, what happens is that you grow as a person,
Yes.
right? It's like going from to different planets and exploring different planets, because you assume like every planet is going to be like Earth, right? But when you end up going to Mars, you're like, oh wow, okay, there's nothing over here. What's going to happen? And you have to retune your mind to fit that environment, right? And I think that's beautiful. And I remember just last week I was having a conversation, or I was reading something. I can't remember, because my wife and I keep discussing quite a few things. And I think I read it in a book that if you have to choose between easy and tough, choose the tough, because nobody is in that space, because they're so they don't want to take up any challenge because they know how rough the road is going to be, right? But if you
Hmm.
go on the easy side, out of 199 people, you'll find on the easy side because it's easy to do, and then that doesn't distinguish you as an outlier. But the
Yeah.
minute you take the challenging thing, that's where the maximum learning happens, irrespective of the outcome,
Yeah.
right? So that's how I also look at these sectoral shifts. That okay, whatever the outcome is will happen, but at least I'll get to learn new things. I'll get to meet different people. I'll get to experience things that I probably would never put myself in willingly in those situations. So I think it's a bent of mind that sort of needs to happen at every level. And you see all of this on LinkedIn so much, that, hey, after so many years, I'm moving from here to there. I've never done this. I'm so scared. There's so much anxiety because I've never been a part of that. I don't have any experience, but hey, great, And I love those kind of posts because you're trying,
Yes.
you're trying. Yes, you'll fail, perhaps, but that's
Okay.
fine. That's okay, because when
Yeah.
you make that second jump, is when you'll know, okay, I will not do these things. But unless and until you don't push yourself, you won't know, right? So I give this very simple analogy that if somebody takes you to the deep end and they say jump, it's like, no, 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 it's too deep. But then if you don't jump, how will you know how deep it
Oh,
is, right? And that's how you need to aim your dive.
so
So I love people who do that, honestly, just randomly just shift and go in some other direction. Because then I'm very excited. I'm very intrigued. I say, hey, what's happening there? Tell me. Even I need to know.
So just a quick one, so after 30 years, I decided to go back into academics and I'm pursuing my doctorate. So the first time when I walked into class, the principal
Wow.
was, of course, years younger, and all my classmates, some of them had been my students. So it was
Oh,
a
wow.
disconcerting to walk in and okay, but I said, fine, how does it matter? These guys have to make a career, they have to prove something. I don't. If I do it, it's fine. If I don't do it, it's also fine. But at least I'm trying. So I can totally kind of, get that. Okay. So, guys, if you could swap roles with a woman for a day, who would it be and why? A quick one.
I actually thought about this, and
All
it's
right.
definitely not going to be my wife, because
Okay.
then I'd have to deal with me, who's not the most fun person to be around at certain times of the day.
Okay.
So, yeah, definitely not. But on a serious note, when I was thinking about this, and this goes back to my grandmother.
Okay.
So, a few years ago, when my grandmother turned 90, they did an entire trip with her to Jamaica.
Oh,
So she
okay.
went with all her children, except my mom, who had passed away by then, and their partners.
Wow.
And yeah, imagine 90-year-old celebrating your birthday in
Totally.
Jamaica.
Wow.
When they flew in, they actually announced that, she was celebrating her 90th birthday and she was elated. But for her, the most joy was being around people that she loved.
Yeah.
And to me, my grandmother is always the true evidence when they say that, age is just a number. She was that, because she wanted to stay up, she wanted to go to different places. And yeah, I was very envious because I couldn't make that trip. But
Okay.
so that's one of the reasons also I'd probably want to swap places.
Okay. All right. Nadir?
So I don't have a swapping answer, but I thought about this question, and I'm going to take it a little differently. I would like to imagine or reimagine my life if I was a woman, and um, if I was a woman, and what would have been the milestones, right?
Mm,
Would it be any different?
mm,
Um, if there was a complete gender role change in my case, if I was a woman, what are the things? Whether would have I achieved them, not achieved them?
mm,
And when I put myself in certain places and when I look back on it, and I'll be like, I'm pretty sure this would have been very difficult, whatever
mm.
the situation is, and this could have been in very easy. But see, then again, I'm trying to create these situations in my mind, because I know how tough it is for women in the workforce, right? We know that, and we've seen certain things. So I always go back and say, if I was in that situation, what would have I done? Would I just let it pass? Would I do something about it? And
Yeah.
retrospectively, when you think about it, you're thinking, ha ha ha, I would have done it, because I'm this kind of a person. But then when I really deeply think about it, that
Mm,
being in a woman's shoes, what would be certain decisions that I would have taken? And when I break it down, I realize that no, it's not that easy. It's tough, because there are certain situations that men get away with whatever they want, and in certain situations, it's easy for women. So it's kind of a balance, but of
yeah.
course, the balance is tilted towards one gender, and it's tough. So yeah, it's not easy, but it would be a nice social experiment to try and figure, if we could swap genders, how would it be?
How would it work? Okay. So has there been any time in your life when you've been totally outsmarted by a woman? Completely, totally, and left zapped. Nadir?
So I'll tell you my case.
Yeah.
My daughter was inching towards the age of 5.
Hmm.
Until then, she was sleeping with us.
Hmm.
Um, and both my wife and I were trying very hard to now push her out and
Yes.
sleep in her own room. And get her space. So we tried everything. Okay, let's do this, let's do that, whatever it is. And of course, as a father, I think inherently I'm just a big softie when it comes to I'm very tough with her as well in certain matters. But inherently, end of the day, all you want to just hug her and grab her, whatever it is. So anyway, one night we were just about to go to sleep, and I think my wife was just had it like, listen, we have to get her out of the room. We'll have to think of ways to kind of do it. Obviously, eventually we did, but these were
Yeah.
some of the things that we tried. So one night, I remember we were just putting her to sleep, and she had this habit. She's like, "Papa, haath pakdo." Like, so while sleeping, she wanted to hold your hand and sleep, just like otters so that they don't drift away or whatever. I don't know why. So I was just trying to tell her that, listen, you know what, you have to go to your room one day. You're a big girl now. You need your own space. Mommy, Papa can't sleep because you move around so much. I gave her all those explanations. And then she just turns around. It's like, Papa, I'll tell you what.
Huh.
I will sleep here, but in my dreams, I will go to my room. I was like, that's
Okay.
amazing for like for an almost like a 4.5 year old girl
Yeah,
to
yeah,
even
it is.
of that, this whole out of body experience. Like in my dreams, I will go to my room there. I was just stumped. Like, you have no comeback to that.
You have no
There is no comeback. I thought about it, and I usually think that I'm pretty clever with certain comeback. I was completely stumped. I was like, I don't have a comeback for this. I was like, okay, just shut up and go to sleep, right? What do I do, right? What do I
Yeah,
tell her?
what do you do?
But yeah, I was just completely like, even till today, I'm trying to think of a smart response. There is no smart response. Like, how do you respond to a 4.5 year old who says, I will sleep in this room, but in my dreams I will go to mine? It's beautiful. It's amazing how a child's mind works, and I think it's the kids who can outsmart the adults. Like, it's amazing. But when we were growing up, we were told to be our creativity was so badly curbed, right? Like, you couldn't even give a smart response
Yeah.
to people because you're just worried that, somebody just beat us up or whatever. But today, just leave these kids alone. They will come up with the most incredible things. It's just hilarious what they can do, and it forces you to think, right? Because as a content person, as somebody in advertising, I love this because I'm immediately thinking copy in my mind. Like, oh wow, that's a great copy, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Peter?
Oh my God. There's a lot actually that I can talk about. Uh, I
Just
think
one.
oh wow. Uh, I mean, with our kids, I think there's like every day one thing that Nadir and I can talk about. But I think it'll go back to my wife, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's again a lot of my stories are about my wife because we just spend so much time together. But one of the things I feel that she does well, and I think is she understands like what I'm thinking. So it was just yesterday we were having you know lunch. I mean, sorry, dinner we were having, and
Hmm.
I got like literally emotional, and I go into this zone, and she knows that. Like she reads my face like a book.
Hmm.
And she goes, "What happened?" And I didn't want to tell her. So I said, "No, no, nothing." She's like, "I could see it in your eyes. You got emotional." And I was like, crap. There's no lying to her at all.
Yeah.
And she says to me, she's like, "You can never lie to me because all of it is written on your face." And I feel that, that's one of the things that also talks about just our connection
Yeah.
and the way we are. So the next time maybe she asks me, "Hey, did our son do this or do that?" I have to be truthful because I know she'll know if I'm
Get
lying.
you. Okay. So guys, tell me, in your opinion, what's the most underappreciated aspect of women's achievements in society?
Oh my God. So I'll start off with this. I think and this goes back again to what we were talking in the start, right?
Hmm.
Is a lot of we feel that, we look at just what they've achieved,
Hmm.
but when we look at it at that moment, what we don't realize is the journey
Yeah.
and what cost it's come at, right? Uh, I mean, I think Nadir can agree to this. There are a lot of times we've been in office where we've heard people say that, "Ha, she only got that position because she's a woman," or "Yeah, they only gave her that award because she's a woman." But what we don't realize that, think how hard it has been for her to achieve that or get to where she is, because we still predominantly live in a patriarchal society, right?
Yeah.
It's that much harder for her to get where she's got. And I think there's also, let's be honest, a lot of jealousy that kind of surrounds statements like that, especially around in the workplace when it's made. Uh, I mean, if you think about it, sometimes there are also women who are discriminating against other women.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I again know this from the insight of my wife, where, sometimes I'm like, wait, you know, they should understand it, right? It's another woman who you're talking to. And she says, yeah, but it's that my struggle versus your struggle. It's that
yeah,
comparison
yeah.
that's there. And those are also some of the times where I realize that, okay, this is very different. This is something I will never experience
Hmm.
as a man, right? But I think that is something that's not. We always look at it as, oh, this is the moment, but never realize that this is not today, right? This has been
Yeah.
months, years in the making, right? And I think once you look at it from that perspective, zoomed out, you far appreciate them more than anything else.
Correct. See, it's like, all of that you have to do. I mean, all the multitasking, trying to manage so many things and getting there. And then, what happens? So, as a woman, I can tell you that when you get somewhere, there are people who will say, "Oh, you've done this, but you didn't do that." I mean, you didn't take care of the house or your husband or whatever are the normal things which women are supposed to do. So and it is irrespective of whether it's a man or a woman out there. There are people who will point out, okay, you're doing this, so okay, you're into podcasting. Oh, then who looks after your house? You're going back to academics. So, all kinds of things. Yeah. So we don't realize how difficult and what is the journey and what has been the journey. Nadir, your take on it?
What you just said, I think that is the most underappreciated and what's the word? Recognized, and like
Mhm.
people don't recognize the fact that women are always working, right?
Yes.
Working women are also always working because they work at their workplace, and then when they're back, there's this working. That's how it is. And I would like to say that, you know, not like, sorry, I would probably say that women are wired that way, but then I think that's such a disservice to say something like that, because that's how they've been raised. That हाँ तुझे बाहर काम करना है तो कर ले, लेकिन घर पे आके पकाना तो पड़ेगा, बच्चे का
Rest.
ख्याल तो रखना पड़ेगा,
Karna padega.
right?
Right.
Why? And that is precisely why Peter and I took this journey with Pops in a Pod. That, listen, that's not the narrative. Like, because there are men also who actually want to be like that, and share the load, have the whole equal thing. Because I want to play a much the same role as my wife does in raising our daughter.
Yeah.
And I very well want my mark also on it, because tomorrow when my daughter goes out, she should never ever feel the need to say that my father was never around.
Yes.
That's a
That's
personal defeat for me, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think the whole the when you say that is underappreciated, what are we doing for that? I mean, recognizing the problem is great, but there has to be a very vital, visual solution for it, which is, yeah, men need to set up. And I think there are a lot of great men out there, great husbands, great fathers, who are doing that. Unfortunately, their stories are going unheard.
But I guess, the more we talk about it, we have these kind of conversations, these kind of platforms,
Precisely.
awareness, will come. And yes, like, I mean, I have boys and they are very much interested in getting involved in everything. So right now, also they're involved in what's happening in the house. And I think once kind of you set the tone, then when they kind of get married, have their own families, it'll be a given for them. It won't be a
Exactly.
or it won't be
And
an,
and
they'll understand.
Yeah, and what you just said, right? That with your boys, it's not just your responsibility as a mother to ensure that they turn out to be great boys. I'm sure your partner or people
Yeah,
within your household also should share that load and say that, yes, we have to ensure that these boys don't go out and do something stupid or wrong or
yeah.
whatever it is. They just have to be great, upstanding citizens irrespective of the gender. And that is exactly what this generation is trying so hard in doing. I mean, I feel whatever people say about Gen Z, they have their opinions.
Mm.
That's fine. It doesn't matter. I have been teaching for the last 8 years, so I have seen certain students go up, and I have seen what they do, right? But I can tell you the the generation of my daughter and Peter's son, whatever I think they call Gen Alpha as of
Mm.
now, that generation, we have to look out for them. I mean,
Yes.
sorry, not look out, but we have to be careful because they are so competitive, they are so fierce, and we should do anything and everything to ensure that that energy release is happening and not clamp it down like probably what happened with our generation, right? Where I, let's say, don't question back, that is how it is, bus I don't ask me these questions. But my daughter and I have this game where she keeps insisting on asking why, and my job is to keep answering till I reach to the point where I say I don't know, like I don't know now, you've asked me 10 whys. So my daughter's like, yeah, I reached 10 whys, my aim is 15 whys. And I was like, great. So we gamify the entire experience, and she also feels so involved, right? Because that's the point. I don't want to shut her up. I just want to say, okay, throw another one at me. Let me see if I can answer this and I can, sort of quell your curiosity in any way. But yeah, Gen Alpha, that's one generation I'm looking forward to, seeing what happens when they
But,
grow up.
keeping up with all these various kinds of gens, the Z and the Alpha, it is sometimes, it gets very, very confusing. But yeah, I guess we're getting there. So guys, finally the rapid fire. So these are 5 questions and I will be alternating between you. Of course, both of you get to answer all 5, but yes, who goes first, I'll decide. So Peter, what's the most rewarding aspect of being a father? A quick one.
When my son says I love you. I think
Oh,
that's like something I'll never take for granted because I know for a fact at one point he will not so willingly say it to me.
yeah.
So yeah, that's at
Yes.
this point is.
Yes, Nadir.
The fact that a 7 and an 8-year-old girl can outsmart me so easily is beautiful to see. It's amazing what these kids can do.
Yeah, yeah. So the next one's for you, Nadir. I mean, you go first. If you could trade places with your child for a day, for your daughter, what would you do?
I would try my hand at gymnastics because she's a professional gymnast, and I would try and do that. She does it for 3 hours in a day, and I would try and do that for one day, probably maybe for 3 minutes, and just see how it feels like to bend your body in all different directions,
All
and
the
then
best.
try and yeah, I would love to do that. Like when I see what my daughter can do with her body and contort her body in different positions, I'm like, I wish I could do that. So yeah, I want to do that.
Okay. Peter?
I would say, and now this is again age talking, I wish I could go back and just eat all the candy in the world.
All right.
Because at that point, you just don't care. I mean, of course, for one day alone,
Yeah,
but we grew up in that generation also who was given that one square of Cadbury or Dairy Milk or whatever, and that was it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But I just want to go back and eat all the various candy.
Okay. So, Peter, this time you go first. So, best piece of advice you've received from another dad, and don't say it was Nadir.
Oh my God. Wow. You really put me on the spot with this one. Uh, but this actually advice
And
comes
I can see
from
Nadir
someone.
thinking, okay.
So,
Yeah, all
so
right.
this actually comes from someone I work with currently, Varun Dugirala. So
Mm-hmm.
his advice to me was don't try and fix, because I think, and I'll give some context to it. As parents, we always try and fix these things in our kids because we see a reflection of them. We're trying to kind of live vicariously and say that, oh, don't do this because we know what the problem would be. And he was like, look, you only know all that you know because you made the mistakes. Let them make the mistakes, but let your kids know that when they make the mistakes that they're coming back to you and talking about it and comfortable. And I think after reflecting on that, I realized how powerful it was, because as parents, we always want to protect our kids, right? We want them not to fall. Let them fall. It's okay. They'll know from that, right? Because that's how we learned. So I think that was a very important lesson for me, really.
Okay. Yes, you got time to
So this
think.
is uh I was trying to contemplate in terms of who should I prop up.
Mm.
But this is a very recent conversation that I had with my boss, and he said that don't plan your life around your kid. So if you want to travel, just travel. Um, because please try and understand that your child still has many, many years to go, um, as compared to you.
Hmm.
So if you have to travel, just do it, just go. It doesn't matter, right? But because if you start planning things around your kid, it's just going to make things far more difficult for you. So give them credit. I'm
Hmm.
sure they'll grow up fine, but you enjoy. You don't stop living your life. And
Absolutely.
um, I think it was a very, very interesting advice because I'm I'm a I'm a pretty selfless kind of a person. I don't I'll always try and help other people. And this time, it just felt like, yeah, I should look after myself. I should help myself. Yeah, my kid will figure it out. I'm pretty sure of that.
Which they will. Which they will.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So the next one's for you. Favorite family vacation destination? That's a simple one.
Oh wow. I want to say Goa, but the thing is, our family travels too much there because part of our family is actually, and my in-laws are actually from there. But
Okay.
last September, we did a trip to Europe,
Uh-huh.
and my son was not too keen. And for him, it was because he's so used to beach destinations and stuff like that. But my wife will agree when she hears this. Our son's reaction when he saw the Eiffel Tower light up in the evening, we
Yeah.
have that recorded on video. It is priceless.
Oh, I'm
The
sure.
fact that he realized, and the fact is also, for him, it was an experience which was completely new, especially going to Europe. So I think that, and also that was the last major holiday we took. So I think that Europe trip was something really special to all three of us.
Okay. Nadir?
So for us, there is one major trip that we do every year.
Hmm.
We try our best to ensure all times and all breaks and whatever is aligned, and then we take off. So it's a different destination every time. But our go-to place is actually just 5 hours away from Mumbai. It's a nice hill station called Panchgani, and we
Hmm.
just love going there because we are all mountain people, right?
Okay.
I personally am not a big beach person, so I don't like beaches. So we love it because the air is cleaner. It's colder compared to Bombay.
Yeah.
Bombay is an oven right now, so it's just a great place to go away, and we try and go there at least twice or thrice. So even if you just manage to spend 2-3 days over there, it just completely erases all those issues, problems. And my kid gets a lot of space, right? So she keeps doing her cartwheels and her backflips and whatnot. So she loves it. She absolutely loves the space. So for us, I think collectively, all three of us, we look forward to just take that short break and just go off and just switch off completely.
Lovely. Lovely. So the final one, Nadir, you go first. What's your favorite dad hack?
I I don't think it's more of a hack,
Uh-huh.
but it's more of an exercise, which is before I put my daughter to sleep, and now we've got attuned to each other's understanding as to what we need to do.
Hmm.
Where if I have to get some information out of her,
Hmm.
how was school, what do you do,
Yeah.
how was gymnastics, what's it's going like, I have to start treating her as my equal. So I will tell her how my work was. I say, what happened? This happened and that happened, and I had a bad day, and this didn't work out, and that didn't work out. So
Hmm.
what I noticed that I can see those gears moving in her brain, so she knows exactly how to probably answer. And then I go and say, "So how was your day? What did you do? There's something happened. Oh, so you know what, Papa?
Yeah.
That boy, and it just starts like, okay,
Okay.
there we go. It's all coming out now. It's all coming out. So yeah,
Yeah. That's a
very nice.
small one. Yes, Peter.
So my dad hack, and I think fellow dads or parents who are listening in will should definitely steal it,
Hmm.
is and I kind of learned this off, I think, Instagram Reels or something,
Oh,
is
wow.
when my son is having a tantrum,
Huh?
I just let him get it all out of his system.
Okay.
Because one of the most, and especially when it's in public, right? I mean, every parent has been there where you're embarrassed, your kid is screaming and whatnot. And you're like, oh, no, 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 don't do this. I was like, get it out of your system.
Hmm.
Because when I reflected, I realized, and when I was reading that, that's
Hmm.
exactly how we are as an adults, also, right? You just want an outlet for whatever you're feeling. He says, I'm angry. He's not really angry. He may be annoyed, but angry is the only word. Or, I mean, when I thought about it, I was like, wow, sometimes a lot of us have that inner child still who
Yeah.
kind of throw tantrums, but in very different ways. So I don't go to kind of fix it at that point. I just hear him out, because sometimes all we want is just someone to hear what we're feeling. And once he's got that out of his system, I tried to get him to breathe, but his reaction would be, I don't like breathing. So I was like, okay, let's take a walk. Let's do something to kind of distract his mind.
Yeah.
And then I kind of say, okay, what happened? Why do you feel that way? Right?
Mm.
Because I feel a lot of what we're doing is just reacting, and it's not because we want to react, it's because, hey, what others are thinking around us, someone will think I'm a bad parent or things like that. At some point I have to give up, because I was like, and I think you said this very nicely earlier, right? No matter what you do, someone's always going to be saying something. So you just got to live with it, right? As long as you're being true to yourself. Because let's be honest, that tantrum you may remember, the kid will not remember in a few weeks or days, right? So but they will remember how you reacted to that,
Yes,
what you said to them, what you did. And I think that is more important than the entire thing. So yeah,
absolutely.
whoever's listening in, steal it, please.
Okay. Yes, actually a great hack. So thank you so much, guys. This was delightful, absolutely delightful. And like I said, if we want a more inclusive world, we have to get the views of both the genders on board. And this is season 2 of my podcast. Season 1 was all about women. And season 2, I wisened up and I said, no, I must get men on the show. And I think you've been a wonderful addition. Thank you so much. It was incredibly delightful to have you there. Hope you
Thank
had
you
a
so
great
much,
time.
Sangeeta. We love talking about just parenting, and then it just spins off into other topics, as you rightly said, gender equality, and we all need it. Everyone needs to practice it and
Yeah.
just make it second nature. So thank you so much for inviting us. We absolutely loved it, and we love having these conversations.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks so much. I mean, it was great speaking to you and just getting a chance to kind of talk about some of these things, because I feel with Nadir and me doing our podcast, Pops in a Pod, sometimes we're so stuck to just parenting and certain things. We get to like talk about other aspects that we don't normally talk about. So
Yeah,
thanks so much.
more than welcome.